welcome to the latest episode of the Interjections podcast, which we've titled The Undiscovered Decade. We take a look back at the movies of the 1990s and we try to find what we consider hidden gems. And this month, we're looking at August 1990, movie that came out on August 10th called Air America. I'd heard about this, but I didn't really know what it was about. And it's basically Mel Gibson and Robert Downey Jr. are pilots, and they're freelance. They come into Laos and help drop packages of supplies, food, whatever might be needed by the villagers out in the middle of the jungle or up in the mountains, and just follows their escapades as Robert Downey Jr. is brought in from America to join this crew that they've dubbed Air America. So
yeah, and and they're over there in Laos during Vietnam, so like it's supposed to be an unofficial involvement. That's why it's an American company being fronted by the CIA.
It's not a war; it's a courier service.
Yeah.
There's a lot of subterfuge, and then it's not that weird that they tried this, but apparently it's one of the first things that was done for Vietnam. Most of them had been dramas. Most of the films had been dramas about Vietnam, and now this was trying to attempt to bring comedy to it.
Is it a comedy though? Here's the thing with this movie.
Yeah.
The tone is all over the place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has a consistent tone. Mel Gibson at times is the sobering cynic of the group, and then at other times he's the prankster doing coloring books in the back while Robert Downey Jr. is flying.
And freaking out about he can't see the mountains through the fog.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a very bipolar movie.
Which fits Mel Gibson because he, had been made famous from Lethal Weapon being a bipolar detective. So
this is a bad year for Mel Gibson between this and Bird on a Wire.
Yeah, you were saying a couple months ago when that came out. Not quite memorable. Well, can't always hit with the gems, but I enjoyed it as it was going along, though I don't think it's the best film. I was happy to see young Mel and young Robert Downey Jr.
Very young. He's like he's babyface.
It's pretty early in Downey's career.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. See, I was in it for young RDJ and our Lord and Savior Roger Deakins.
Oh, right. Roger Deakins shot this. Was
Yeah.
this pretty early in his career? I forgot to look at his filmography.
Pretty early. Like he had done Blade Runner and stuff. Like he'd been doing stuff since the 80s. So
yeah.
I'm sure he did some stuff with the Coens, right? By this point.
Well, that was Barry Levinson to start. Stuff like
No Sonnenfeld you're thinking of.
Or Sonnenfeld, yes. Thank you. I don't know if he finished with Miller's Crossing or not, but that might be the first Deakins.
Right.
Downey had just done Chances Are. Was about to do Soap Dish. He'd hit it bigger with stuff like Chaplin because he gets his first Oscar nomination. But it was still kind of like in the Brat Pack phase.
He's still got some baby fat to his face. He looks he looks very fresh. Although it's weird, he's supposed to be the young rookie of them all, but he's the most straight out of all of them.
Yeah.
It's weird for a movie that's trying to be a buddy comedy. They spend maybe a half hour together at tops.
Yeah, only when they finally have to walk through the jungle together. Because
I think this thing's mismarketed as a buddy action comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. And that, wait, how well did this movie do?
Not that well.
Not at all.
It debuted at third, and I think it didn't really. I closed that tab. It didn't really do much more.
Because I was gonna say
it made like $3 million to start.
Okay, because I was gonna say the tradition of an 80s comedy and well into the 90s is have a lot of cars crash.
Yeah.
And this movie was a little ambitious, and they had tried to have a lot of planes crash.
Yeah.
So
first one's played for laughs.
Backfired a little because they sunk too much budget on crashing planes and making them explode, and not focusing on the writing.
Yeah.
it was almost like they were trying to just do Lethal Weapon, but in Vietnam.
Laos.
I felt like they were trying to do MASH at times with some of the hijinks, especially with the Art LaFleur character and some of the other ones.
Yeah.
Right.
But again, the tone is so non-committal as to whether it wants to be a drama or a comedy that you can't really laugh at the
Right.
cynical humor, like the Richard Rush stuff. As a matter of fact, Tristan and I watched a movie by Richard Rush called The Stuntman, which balances the tone perfectly, which goes back and forth between surrealist comedy and drama and then some action.
Right.
But that
It
walks
would
that
be nice
fine
if it was
line
like that.
perfectly. I don't think Roger Spottiswoode has the chops to do it.
Well, wasn't it supposed to be someone else? I read that it was going to be either Rush himself or someone else, and Spottiswoode. I think there was another film he had just done where he filled in for someone, and
Right.
so they took that, and he got the Air America job because he had done so well filling in. They were like, "We just need someone to get this done quickly." So,
Like, I would think he would have had a lighter touch with the heroin smuggling stuff. They kind of gloss over that a bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
I do like Roger Spottiswoode because he did one of my favorite Bond films that I think is underrated, Tomorrow Never Dies.
I
Everyone
totally
talks
agree
about
with you.
Goldeneye, but the second one that Pierce Brosnan did is just as fun.
Might be the best one, actually, in my mind, for Pierce
You like it?
Brosnan.
It's my favorite of the Pierce Brosnan Bond films, but
Hmm.
Goldeneye.
I think GoldenEye's a tad overrated.
I like them both, but I think I like Tomorrow Never Dies more. I think it's I like Michelle Yeoh and Jonathan Pryce, right?
Yeah.
And
Terry Hatcher.
the problem is you can't complain about anyone in Goldeneye either. So, but I think Spottiswoode's direction, he honed his action skills probably from this to make Tomorrow Never Dies the good film it became. So we can't fault this movie for that. He's still cutting his chops.
I mean, he did Shoot to Kill, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it might have been fun if it was just Richard Rush taking over. You know, I wonder if they'd wanted him to do it. I didn't actually see anything about him other than he wrote it.
The other thing is Nancy Travis.
Yeah.
She's in it?
Yeah.
Barely.
Yeah.
Not really sure what her character's supposed to be.
A plot device for the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they could have gotten anyone else, but they were seeing she was getting bigger with stuff like Loose Cannons wasn't that big, but
3 Men and a Baby, I guess.
Yeah, she's the girl from that. So she had a pretty decent year, if not these two films not doing that well. Though you know what? You say that Air America didn't do well. This was Robert Downey Jr.'s second biggest film until Iron Man.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
How is this possible?
It's I think it made like 38 million, but he didn't do that well through the 90s because he was tapering off, and the early 80s movies they were making like 10 to 20. So it's just above those.
A movie that he starred in, I guess.
Yes.
Because Back to School, I know, did better than this.
Right.
And Weird Science.
That's like the other one.
Right.
But yeah, so he didn't really make it money-wise until the last decade or so. It was all he was co-starring and stuff. So
I mean, he probably was raising a kid at the time.
no, the kid was heroin.
Well, he had a kid eventually. He cleaned up and
The kid was falling asleep in people's houses after he conked out on heroin.
Oh no, falling asleep in babies' cribs in people's houses.
Did he actually have a child? I don't know. He married Susan.
Yeah, no, I don't know how when his kid was born. So like maybe this was like that was later. But like yeah, no, definitely he had issues with like the joke that was
falling asleep in people's houses.
Falling asleep in people's houses in their babies' cribs.
Well, like a month later was his first arrest for drug possession.
Yeah.
I did.
It's weird. They should have capitalized on that and made him like the wild maverick of the group.
Oh,
they tried to in that one scene. There was a scene where Mel, after having an ethical discussion about everything up in the hills, they come back and Robert Downey Jr. is just like, I'm gonna do what I want. And Mel's like, I warned you against that. Didn't you tell me to do what I want? Like, it didn't make any sense. And he then goes to try to blow up the Pepsi plant that's hiding all the heroin. So
it went like
that was product placement, by the way.
Yeah.
Reverse product placement.
Well, probably Coke that
put in. They were forced to put in a line because Pepsi didn't like their abandoned factory being like they wanted them to use a fictional soda company. You know, because they didn't want to be associated with an illicit
Heroin smuggling.
right.
Yeah.
So
Even if it's
they
not
add, they added they
Dumb
added the
people are gonna
line.
assume.
Yeah, so the producers added the line. I wonder if Pepsi knows about this.
Yeah.
Oh,
It helped me. I heard that. I'm like, oh, that's nice. Maybe that's how they got Pepsi to agree. So I knew. But it made it
I
more
mean, you have
realistic, I think, because
have
then
to
you have
give
a real thing, a real company, funding the situation.
Well, it's not like it was an abandoned Pepsi
Yeah.
factory.
Yeah, but if it was a
So-
fake soda, that kind of takes me out of
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah, no, true. Yeah.
I hate
also
my
everybody knows Pepsi's fake anyway.
Right. My
It's not a real
biggest,
soda.
my biggest pet peeve is that when you look at someone's phone nowadays and it just looks like it was a blue screened made up thing. There's like only two versions of text that we get, and it's
Right.
iPhone or Android, but it's always like something different, and you can tell, oh, the budget was low on this film. They
yeah,
didn't
like
have-
they're using Comic Sans. Nobody has Comic Sans.
exactly.
Yeah.
So when they have an actual product like Pepsi show up, it feels better. So
Feels more grounded.
yeah.
Also to like go with the integrity of this being a historical fiction film or historical not fiction. I don't know what
mean-
based on a book, but was it like how what's the level?
I think
of
it's like a
realism?
Joseph Heller like Catch-22 type book.
Yeah, Christopher Cousins I think it was Christopher Cousins had been in Vietnam, doing similar stuff. He may not have been a pilot, but he was there doing journalistic stuff. It's kind of like that. What was that Tina Fey movie where she's in Afghanistan?
Whiskey Tango Foxtrot.
Yeah, he was in that sort of situation. And then he writes a book, and it was called Air America because he hung out with all these pilots, so he knew what their situation was and how they couldn't really tell anyone what was going on.
Okay.
In mind. So
See, I didn't know if this was like based on true events or if it was,
true enough.
Yeah,
there probably wasn't an actual Gene Ryak and Billy Covington, but they're amalgamations of people that Cousins met.
just two bad
think the
guys
one
in a worse
person-
situation.
I think the one person that hits the right balance in terms of tone, because they're a little cartoonish in the movie, is Lane Smith
Yes.
as the senator.
Yeah. So
I wish
the
it
other
was
thing that
more of
happened-
him.
We didn't mention that the other situation that's going on at the same time as these pilots teaching Downey how to fly everything is a senator has come to inspect the CIA operation, which is a covert smuggling ring. And so you got Ken Jenkins, who was on Scrubs as Kelso, the commander of the ER, and he's the one hiding all the smuggling. And then this Senator Lane Smith comes in to investigate. So, like
Yeah.
you were saying,
It feels like almost like the senator character was brought in to be the comic relief, but because everyone else is so over the top, he just comes off as more of the straight man.
Yeah,
he doesn't-
yeah, definitely during like the nightclub scene where they go golfing afterwards, where they're all being eccentric, like Tim Thomerson and Art LaFleur.
yeah.
I was like, oh, this is cool. This is gonna get to see a lot of character actors shine in this scene, and then they're kind of put off to the side. I really don't even know their names in the movie.
I don't either.
Yeah, no.
Neely.
Yeah, there's
I only knew Art LaFleur's character name because they kept yelling it after he died. Like that was the
yeah.
and then I realized I didn't even know it was him at first until I'm like, wait, he's missing from the scene.
Yeah. That was kind of a letdown because he's talking about the golden BB the whole time. He's so scared of dying, and then he just dies off screen.
Yeah, that was
Right.
You're real.
I
mad
feel
about
like this was edited confusingly.
it? Yeah.
Well, no, like he did say like before the first crash, he was like, "Oh, I feel it. This is the golden BB."
Sure.
And like you see him like survive the crash, and you think, "No, he's fine." But then like later on, when you see the two main characters come back from the jungle and they survived too, because there was like a second and third crash and whatnot, and there was a certain
Which was
like
confusing.
a rescue party, and he was part of the rescue party. Like you had that little bit at the beginning where he said the golden BB, I feel it, this is it. Then he survives, and you're like, oh, maybe he dodged it.
Right.
But then
So
you finally
misdirect.
there's like a resolution where everybody seems to be coming back all right. Then you see his dead body covered in a tarp with his camera on top of him. So like he's dead. So it's not entirely off screen, but it's like 2 or 3 seconds if you don't pay attention.
I think it's a double-edged sword because I wanted to see him die, but
Yeah.
then you get this sense that Mel Gibson and Robert Downey Jr. have of missing him because you weren't there. You probably would have died too. So you're on their side of emotions.
And that's kind of a thing with like a job like that. Even if you go back to like the First World War and Second World War with like combat pilots, like you have a bunch of people doing separate sorties or going on separate missions, then you come back to base and you're like, oh man, where's so-and-so? He didn't make it. Yeah. And like that, you kind of get that like that vibe a little bit.
Despite in the moment not liking it, I think it was better that way, even if it was an accident in editing. Because even if they filmed a scene of him dying, it might have been smarter to do it that way because it brings out your emotions.
You know what I thought in terms of structure when we started getting in the second half and they're hanging up in the tree canopy and they have to eject themselves. I was like, oh, this is gonna be cool. This is gonna narrow it down to these two characters. It's gonna be like a survival action movie for the last half. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I was so excited for the prospect of that. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, I thought that was gonna be the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
But it was like another 10 minutes maybe.
The most sobering, serious part was the interaction with, I think it was the senator was asking Mel Gibson about keeping the kayak.
Yeah.
And, because he hired some local craftsman to make this thing that looks like a small ark, and then you find out that it's Neely's coffin.
Yeah.
And that's like, oh.
That's the point at which you realize the senator isn't as dumb as he's been made out to be. You realize that Mel, while he's joking around all the time, he does have that serious nature on him. While it's bipolar in tone for the film, Mel, I think, was pretty solid throughout.
Yeah, I think
that might be me though. I think I was attached to Mel more than Robert Downey.
Yeah, his crazy is very like in tune with his character because like he converted to Buddhism. So like his crazy is just like chaos.
It's a little more grounded because he has a wife and a kid.
You just gotta roll with it. Like he's kind of like he's like one of those he's a cowboy in the East. Like all these movies are just gonna be cowboy movies. From now on, like he's a cowboy in the East.
I wanted to look into what the Buddhist meditation on death was because he starts to skim the surface of that, and I felt like if this were constructed in a way that was maybe brilliant, they might have presented it as what the journey for a Buddhist is to an American audience, because I feel like that's what they wanted to do. And that's why Mel's character is talking about everything he does when he's showing where his wife lives to Downey, where the kayak comes in. But I don't think they go into it enough.
I don't feel like there's any character has an arc.
Except Neil.
Like it's implied that people have arcs, but you don't see it.
The closest thing to an arc is probably just Robert Downey Jr. getting hazed by Mel Gibson in the first round, and then all of a sudden, like, they're besties.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, all right, you've crossed the threshold.
I don't mind that. Because that's typical of a buddy comedy movie. But then again, the tone shifting all the time.
Yeah. Well, then you have Mel Gibson's thing at the end where, like, he throws out the cargo that he's been saving up for years. Because he's been running a gun running operation also in addition to this, like just personally, that's his retirement plan. And then he's, that goes back to, what's her face's character?
Nancy Travis.
Yeah, Nancy Travis's character at the end where all of a sudden they have to pick up all these refugees. And Mel Gibson's like, really? Come on, man.
Yeah. That was kind of funny. I feel like it's forced on him, but it is kind of amusing to be like, you knew he was going to dump it anyway, but like,
yeah,
it's just fate, which that's why I wanted to look into this Buddhist stuff, because is that why he's okay with everything? He's on a linear path, so whatever happens is meant to be. I don't know if that was their intention or not. But
I feel like they could have gone a lot further into that and incorporated it into the story, but going back to the editing notes, I feel like they probably tried that at one point, but some got lost in translation. It didn't work well with test audiences.
yeah,
Because when you listen to like the music and everything, like it goes full buddy comedy at one point, and you're like, it was almost like I was getting some Short Circuit 2 vibes. Like that's
God, I wish Fisher Stevens was in this.
yes.
speaking of the soundtrack, it's kind of heavy on the prototypical Vietnam movie music.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I heard the Rolling Stones at one point. Needle drop.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they definitely were trying a little hard with the Vietnam like sound by using music from that era, but like that's kind of typical. But like it does feel forced in that like to contrast it, they use like 90s sitcom riffs like in other moments. Like if you had more if the non-musical interludes weren't so typically 90s campy, the contrast wouldn't be so bad and drastic.
Yeah.
And then like better feel for a movie. Like the Vietnam music would work out fine because
It's funny, 30 years later they're still using the same music to signal Vietnam, because I swear to God, some of the same songs were played in Kong Skull Island.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's the 70s. Gotta have I don't know the name.
Guy of the Rolling Stones.
Yeah. Gotta paint it black.
Yeah.
So I wanted to point something out. I don't know if you guys were aware. I don't know what research you guys did, but I didn't realize. So Ken Jenkins, the guy who's running the CIA covert operation for the smuggling and everything, he has an assistant who kind of bumbles and messes up his situation, revealing everything to the senator obtusely. Played by this guy, David Marshall Grant. His name's Robert Deal. He's based on a guy named Jerry Daniels, who apparently was actually an advocate for all the Hmong, the hill people. And he was actually kind of a good person. He wasn't part of any drug smuggling. He was more of the Nancy Travis character. And in real life, he died in 1982, and people just say that they've seen him still in Laos, helping as much as he can, and that he may have faked his death so that he could continue his refugee work without people trying to assassinate him, because that had happened quite a bit. So this guy was actually a good guy. And the general, the Laotian general that they depict in the film, this actually became a bit controversial because that guy was also an advocate for the Hmong people and helped them get to Montana, where Jerry Daniels was from. So there's a big community in Montana of people from Laos that settled because they were trying to escape persecution in Laos. And so this real life general was a good guy. He was not hiding heroin in a Pepsi company,
You should say who plays that one general.
Army. So
right. And so
you should say who plays that one general. It's a weird bit of casting.
It's Burt. I don't know how to say this.
Burt Kwok.
Kwok. He was Kato in the Pink Panther films.
Yeah.
So
I'd never seen him in anything else aside from that.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was him.
It was so odd.
I was
like, "Where's Peter Sellers, man?"
It was pretty funny though, that moment where Lane Smith shows up and tries to give him the bags and everything. That was good. So I would have liked more of him, but it's just funny that the real life people were good people and they decided to make them, of all the people, like obviously Covington and
Hollywood tropes. You gotta Hollywood xenophobic tropes. You gotta make.
Yeah. How can we make Mel Gibson and Robert Downey Jr. look good?
Yeah.
Right.
Let's make all these really good people look bad.
But to contrast that, Ken Jenkins' character, the real life person, was the general who abandoned the army and became embroiled as a freelance gun smuggler in the Iran-Contra affair a few years later. So he really is an asshole. And that character is accurate. So it's kind of weird that they chose to lump these two good people with the bad one.
Yeah.
They could have just made up bad people. entirely fictional, you know? Have a kernel of a seed of what actually happened and roll from there.
I mean, you could have had a completely different movie if like you had those characters like more accurate to the real personas that they were supposed to portray.
Yeah, and I don't know this for a fact, but what if those people did have all the drug smuggling and the guns running and stuff, but we're also trying to help the Hmong people? So there's a gray line. Like,
Yeah.
they're trying to do good, but they have to fund it somehow.
Yeah, because that's the thing with like covert operations. Like you can't have,
That'd have been a better
money
movie.
trail to make it like official by the government. Because like then people were like, "What? You're doing this?
Yeah.
Huh? That's the. What, do you have no morality?" It's like that's why we made it covert, so that way you wouldn't freak out about it. 'Cause
Right. So I think
Stop writing a better movie, Jimmy.
I'm sorry.
Stop it.
So this is the thing. We should be remaking mediocre films, not the best films.
They should remake this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it would be good if like they tweak just a little bit.
Revisit films that had potential but flopped, and then hell, we probably could make this, and like we won't call it Air America. We'll call it American Airlines.
I think that's taken.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, then we'll call it.
Not as a film title.
Call it The Flight Attendant. Oh,
Yeah.
damn it, that's taken
Oh,
too.
whoops. Is that what that's about? I haven't watched it
I
yet.
don't.
Okay.
I don't watch it.
or we could get like a
Never
little
gonna see it.
little artsy and call it like Moonlight over Laos or whatever. Something I don't know, something stupid. It'll be fine. Throw in that
Moon over
romance
Parador
that they
2,
did
Laos.
in,
Operation Dumbo.
Robert Downey Jr. and the
Operation Heroin Drop.
Yeah, they were like they really do much with that.
Why was there a romance into that? Do you think that was forced on by the studios? Maybe that's the entirety of Nancy Travis's role.
It's very underdeveloped for sure.
Oh yeah.
Because that ending when Robert Downey Jr. looks at him like, "Come on, I might sleep with her."
Right.
Okay, I'll drop my
Yeah,
entire nest egg for you to maybe get laid.
You know what? They did kind of maybe
Yeah, but he has a wife
that
and
split
kids in the
between
movie.
the lieutenant that was like the real life lieutenant who was helping people.
Mm-hmm.
Because like when they introduced the the humanitarian, she was like on a like date with the other guy at the beginning
with Deal or whatever.
so I guess
Yeah,
that, like there was like a small
yeah.
attempt.
Yeah, I bet the book actually goes into the real details, obviously, but it's
Maybe
probably just
juggling too many characters couldn't.
yeah. I guess we've pretty much gone through everything though. I was gonna say, do you guys have any final thoughts?
I hated it.
Oof. Okay, I
I
guess
mean,
this is the worst.
This is like probably the worst year Mel Gibson's ever had since that DUI. Between this and Bird on a Wire.
Yeah. Well, he has Hamlet later this year.
Okay. Yeah, it just gets worse.
You don't like that Hamlet?
No,
I think it's better than the Kenneth Branagh one.
that is very controversial, sir. We'll have to get to that later in the 90s.
I was thinking that they're actually that good.
Yeah, this movie's a little too non-committal with its tone, and it doesn't go. This is like that soft middle ground where they're not quite sure if they want to be a drama or a comedy. I always hate that. You know that.
Yeah.
But
sorry.
I don't really think they exhibit much chemistry either, the two of them, because they're not given enough time to be together.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
But it looks like a hatchet job behind the scenes. Whoever did the editing for this just ruined it, bungled it.
I think maybe also like just like the pre-production and writing, like maybe whoever was in charge should have probably like stayed off the coke.
Well, it is
Because
They're doing their own supply for the movie.
It feels like they were trying to rush it anyway because, looking into it, it was originally developed around 1985. And they were trying to get it into the theaters, but then Good Morning Vietnam beat it to the punch.
It feels like a knockoff of that.
Yeah. But I
There's
mean,
a lot of different casting choices too for the lead roles.
Oh yeah, you were gonna mention.
Like Bill Murray was going to be the Mel Gibson role. I kind of see it
He's
in
kind
a
of
way. He played it very differently.
exhausted by everything. He'd maybe play up the Buddhist angle.
Yeah, you're right. Right, because Razor's Edge was only 10 years before this, so it'd be interesting. At one point, James Belushi, and Kevin Costner were going to be in this.
Well, Turner and Hooch had just happened.
Can't imagine that that landing at all.
Yeah, no.
Or Canine. I always mix those up.
And then Sean Connery was even thought of for the Mel Gibson role.
Yeah, before the Untouchable, or well, it was coming off of the Untouchables, right? Was that before this?
Yeah.
So it would have reunited Sean Connery and Kevin Costner. Costner might have been the Covington role. So
I can't. It doesn't work.
yeah, they were much too big for this. I was gonna say too. We pointed out that Richard Rush had directed The Stuntman and everything. When I saw that he had written this, and a former editor before he did Shoot to Kill, Spottiswoode had been an editor for a lot of things and had written 48 Hours. So they had the talent, but they probably should have switched. I think it would have been a better film.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the casting was good for what it was, but the movie was not that great. Like honestly, the cinematography was great, but the movie was about a half hour too long for what it was, especially because it was so non-committal, to use Corey's words. But
that is a good.
Especially if they were trying to like play up the buddy comedy thing. It was like it was the length of a serious movie, but it was just. I think if they had trimmed it down a little bit, they could have, honed in on one particular vibe they were going for. I think they just wanted to use all of that aerial footage, so they're like, we're just gonna add another 30 minutes of flying sequences.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? And the aerial footage is kind of dwarfed by when Spielberg does Always later in the 90s.
Yeah.
And it's a much better film, and it has better aerial choreography too.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask about the two biggest set pieces. There's the one at the end, how he crashes into the already down plane. I thought that was a little much. They would be down.
That was silly.
Yeah. They would have gone through the windows, like turned to spaghetti.
Yeah, they land right in the fuselage, and I'm like, I don't buy this.
There's a lot of stuff on the inside of a plane, and for you to land a plane inside
and
into another plane
impales you.
Yeah, and like it's completely hollowed out so that they can fit in there.
Also, the amount of explosions and like just how volatile the wings are on those other planes.
Oh, sure.
I was about to say, like when that first plane crashed, like the tail like came completely off and then it just blew up. I'm like, there's like that part doesn't blow up like that.
Yeah, and then that tower blows up. It's like there were explosives rigged to it already.
Yeah, and like the funny thing is like when they like crash at that site, they even established like just like a few seconds before, it was like, okay, we could land in this old abandoned Imperial Japanese airbase, and like it was like if it wasn't an abandoned Imperial Japanese airbase, like it would have been stripped of all valuables, including like fuel and like whatever. Like people would have used that shit.
That would be down from the tower.
So like anything that would have exploded should have been not there.
Yeah.
I feel like this film was partially the inspiration for Tropic Thunder.
Oh yeah, I realized halfway through. Right, that's where Downey's other Oscar nom comes from, where he's making fun of basically this film.
Yeah,
it's kind of funny. Speaking of Downey, the other set piece that I want to talk about, which I actually liked but is horribly unrealistic, is in the beginning when he's the traffic pilot and he hovers in front of a truck and yells at him.
Yeah.
How
could he hear him?
Well,
Thank you. I like it, but it's dumb.
Like,
How could he hear him?
Like, because he's an air traffic guy, and like he's on the radio, and like clearly the people at the radio station aren't flipping him off, like switching back to them. They left him on so like they could hear what he's saying to the truck driver live, and they're like, okay. And like you could get why the truck driver was able to hear Robert Downey Jr.'s character because he's tuned into the radio station. But like, how is Robert Downey Jr. able to hear the truck driver?
Right.
Yeah. On top of that, that's another example of we're going to show him to be the nonconformist.
Yeah.
He's going to be perfect at fitting with this ragtag group. And then once he gets on the airbase, he's like, I'm going to be as conservative as possible.
I hate flying.
It's like, that's not why they hired you.
Did not make any sense. But I will say I liked Mel's character more than I did say that.
Yeah,
earlier,
Mel's
like,
character
I was
more.
into him.
He's more endearing.
Yeah. So that's probably my final take.
Because like his crazy is grounded. Everybody else's crazy is just kind of up in the air.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move on.